What's going on, guys? My name is Triforce Addiction. Welcome back to another COD mode video. So today we are going to be discussing the Makarov itself. So in the last video I did talk about the legendary blueprint, but I decided to withhold a lot of details about the Makarov itself and how it performed in, I guess, everyday multiplayer circumstances, because there is actually a lot to discuss with the Makarov. So like I said, we don't really get access to this weapon until around May 1st or May 2nd, which is basically next week, through a seasonal challenge. I'm sure it's not going to be that difficult to unlock. I'm pretty sure it's just like, okay, a few kills with pistols and all that stuff. But you can unlock the Makarovs early if you do manage to get at least the legendary blueprint within the Manta Ray draw. So if you are actually planning to pick it up, it also does give you the base gun itself. So you don't have to go through the seasonal challenge to unlock the base gun. It basically unlocks both for you. So like I said, there is a lot to discuss when it comes to the Makarov, because this is probably one of the more complicated, if not the most complicated weapon to build out properly. I say that with absolute confidence because me and my friend Parker that were grinding this weapon for pretty much the entire duration of like 4 hours, we were having a very difficult time figuring out which is the best akimbo class setup, which is the best single action class setup. It is extremely difficult to find the right one for you, and if anything, it really all comes down to personal preference, of course, but finding the right build to like show to everyone that might, you know, be happy with it is kind of a tough one, because, you know, I could end up accidentally giving guys the worst build in the world, and you guys are gonna hate me for it. So yeah, unfortunately, like, you know, when it comes to like YouTube, I have to be a little bit more careful on how I make these class setup videos. So the way the Makarov works can work in so many various ways. You can have it in akimbo form, you can have it as akimbo with full auto. You could also set the fire rate so it could be slower but with more damage. It could also be just, you know, a normal fire rate with a decent amount of damage, or even faster with like much lower damage but maybe a possibly higher or a lower time to kill. So the damage for the normal Makarov is pretty decent for the most part, but obviously, you know, there are certain ranges and certain things about the Makarov that does kind of fall short in some pretty big ways, especially when it comes to headshot damages and range. So first off, let's actually talk about the attachments, because there are quite a bit of important ones to discuss. So we have 3 barrels in this game, one that gives you more ADS speed at the cost of bullet speed. We also have one that's like a built-in monolithic suppressor that you can use. And the third one, obviously, is the full auto attachment. So obviously with the faster ADS attachment, I don't think anyone's really going to use that. So we're just going to gloss over that one because it doesn't really matter. But the 2 more important barrels that you can use is the full auto and the monolithic suppressor one. So the monolithic suppressor one does keep your gun silent, but also giving you the monolithic suppressor effect where you get 25% extra range at the cost of a little bit of movement speed and ADS speed. But if you're an akimbo, that doesn't really matter too much. But the range is probably the one thing that matters the most. And maybe the vertical recoil control also can play a factor in how you could, you know, hip fire from longer ranges. But that's more of like a attachment I would like to call an alternative attachment, because we do have a second suppressor that is very useful as well, which is the oil can suppressor. This is basically, I guess, the Colossus suppressor for the Makarov. It more or less has the traditional values of the Colossus suppressor before it got nerfed, you know, the vertical recoil control as well as the 40% you know, range boost. But of course, with the Colossus suppressor, it's not really that noticeable. The range still drops like almost immediately, and yes, it's a help, but not as much as you think. The range still kind of falls off pretty massively for the most part. And another drawback, well actually 2 different drawbacks, is the fact that it's a lot harder to aim if you do just use the normal iron sights. I mean, it's not impossible, but I really don't recommend it. I do recommend using some sort of like holographic or red dot sight to help you out there. But the second downside, which is probably a major one, is the fact that you can't actually use any laser sights at all if you do use the Colossus suppressor, I guess the oil can suppressor. This basically means that if you want to use a green laser, you know, the MIP laser or just the red laser or any other laser, you're probably going to have to use the monolithic suppressor barrel in order to actually be able to use the laser, which again, you don't really get the full effect of the range, I guess of the maximum range boost, which is 40%. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but the 40% range boost is really as high as you can go because there's no attachments, or I guess any other attachments that you could actually stack up with the oil can suppressor. So you're just stuck at 40 and you can't go any higher. So while having the oil can suppressor does help your range a bit, it comes at a pretty massive cost. And again, the Makarov is a very fast weapon, so having that on while you're just using a single Makarov doesn't really matter too much. But it does, again, like the fact that you can't put a laser and you can't stack the range any further is kind of a downer. But of course, if it's for the sake of balancing out the weapon, then I'm all for it. It doesn't really bother me that much. I've already figured out a pretty decent build to use. So as for the other stuff like the stocks, the grips, they don't really matter. The triggers do kind of matter a bit depending on how strong you want your gun to be and how fast you want it to shoot. And I think, you know, the fire rate as well as the damage overall on this gun is the part where, like, you know, gunsmithing for this weapon is probably at its most complicated. So we do have 3 different trigger grips that you can use. The first one, of course, is the heavy one, which is basically a higher damage but a slower fire rate type of deal going on. This is something that you can actually mix with either just using full auto or just using single fire. Of course, if you do use the single fire option, or, you know, let's say use other attachments but the auto barrel, you do get a very high amount of damage, almost to the point where I think the headshot damage is above 40. Of course, the major cost of that is that if you miss a shot, you're pretty much screwed. The other 2 triggers involve basically 2 different light triggers. One that increases your, I believe, your fire rate by maybe 18%, and the other one increases it by, I think, 24 or like 26%. Each of these have different downsides. One of them has more movement downsides, such as ADS speed or ADS movement speed, and the other one has hipfire downsides. But of course, the one with the hipfire downsides, I think that's the double action light trigger. I think that one's probably the one that I don't really recommend using, because I actually checked the damage differences because they both have body multiplier downsides. But if you look at both of them, they are exactly the same when it comes to damage output. So it doesn't matter which one you put, you're still going to have the same damage. So the primary damage problem comes from like what attachments you're using. Like I said, if you use the barrel, it already, if you use the full auto barrel, you already reduce your damage by a pretty significant amount. And if you stack that with, you know, a light trigger, it's going to lower the damage even further. And if you manage to, I guess, decide to use akimbo, you're going to lower your damage down to 13. So yes, having all those attachments together, it might sound great given the fire rate that you get with this gun, especially in akimbo form, but trust me, it's going to be your downfall, and I'll explain why. So like I said, while having a faster fire rate and, you know, having it in akimbo form, or even just having it in single-handed form, the problem is that the range just gets significantly reduced, and it also stacks with the fact that you have even lower damage than you probably should have. This is basically going to make it harder for you to do certain challenges such as headshots, or just use the gun casually. And I tried using akimbo with like the fastest fire rate possible with the auto barrel, and trust me, I actually came out short more than you actually would think. But when it comes to the hipfire challenges, at least for the Makarov, using akimbo is by far your best bet. You're just going to get it done naturally. Basically, using akimbo is your best friend when it comes to that challenge. But getting long shots and headshots is a completely different story. You have to kind of like find a way to balance things out so the damage is high enough for you to get headshots easier or get long shots easier. Because for the most part, if you do use like an auto barrel and you use like the light barrel, or I guess the light trigger together, you're never really going to get headshots as easily as you would want. Maybe a 4-shot kill, yes. 5-shot if you're like maybe a few feet away. But if you want to just maximize the damage as much as humanly possible, I do have a build right here. So the build that I have right here is basically maximizing the headshot damage as well as the long range damage in order for you guys to get those long shots and headshots a little bit easier. So what I have is the oil can suppressor holographic sight 2 because it has the best sight picture and the best reticle for the job at least. I also have the lightweight single action trigger. This is the one that gives you basically the highest fire rate possible without having to lose any sort of hip fire, action. Obviously, we do also have the given attachment, which is the 80 round drum. Obviously, this is a must. And we also have the VOK Spetsnaz, which is the bullet spread accuracy, the granulated grip tape, basically. So the reason why I decided to build it this way is because I could maximize range as well as maximizing damage. You guys will obviously notice that I did not have an auto barrel there, but I did have the lightest trigger possible. And if you guys were paying any attention earlier in the video, I did state that the lightweight double action as well as the lightweight single action triggers don't have any differences when it comes to damage output. So that's why I said the other one that decreases your hipfire accuracy is probably the one that you want to avoid, and just go for the one that has the highest fire rate, because it doesn't make any difference. And given that, the lightweight trigger is the only thing that's reducing some damage, and you're not using any sort of auto barrel, your headshot damage is going to go up to 36. Basically meaning that you could actually have a 3-shot potential when you land all 3 shots in the head, making it far easier to get headshots. So trust me when I say this, the build that I just showed you guys right now is going to save you a lot of time, at least when it comes to long shots and headshots. Unfortunately, that's as high as it can go in terms of damage. Well, obviously the headshot damage could be up to like, I think 45, but keeping it enough to get the headshots to like a 3-shot kill, the way I have it built is absolutely perfect. So far I'm really liking the weapon. Of course, once I get it diamond, I'm going to show you a little bit more, or I guess a better build, at least when it comes to the akimbo variation. But again, like this type of class set that I just gave you right now can also be used in normal situations. It doesn't have to just be used for headshot challenges or like anything like that. It has very, very good damage, and I think it could be viable in that way as well. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video for now. Make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe for some more COD mobile content. I'll see you guys next time.